Hi, good afternoon. This is Ricky Ann, and this is my take on the first course requirement for uh, this semester's supply chain management course. And the documentary is entitled The True Cost. So, just a quick introduction of who I am. I am Ricky Ann Obial, and you can call me Rix or Ricky for short. And currently, I am in Taiwan, and actually, it's not really far from the Philippines, so there's no issue with the time zone. So, yeah, so True Cost is produced by and done by Andrew Morgan. It is a courageous discussion of the impact of garments fashion industry to the world, focusing on social and environmental factors. Typically, when someone hears fashion, we tend to think of actually just the glitz and glamour, huh? But what most may not know are the sufferings of some sectors in the society behind the scenes, just so we, the ordinary consumers, can enjoy the modern clothes that we are wearing or having today. The documentary also talked about labor exploitation of some workers in countries or developing countries like India, Bangladesh, Cambodia, and even China, which are known to have the lowest wages in the world. By using cheap labor, business conglomerates of garments or textile industry are able to sell products at lower prices, thus maintaining the high demand, high supply cycle. On top of that, this group of people also seem to care for the workers to produce enough products regardless of safety and their state of well being. These were proven by some hazardous accidents, which will be discussed later on. Since business owners are willing to produce to keep up with the ever increasing demand and offer it on low prices, consumers took clothes as disposable as disposable. Data show that around 400% more than the amount we used to consume in the 1990s. At the time the documentary was finished, it was said that the global consumption of clothes is 80 billion or average of 80 billion per year. This this paved to another issue, which is environmental risk. Uh, Wherein the garments industry is one of the most polluting industries in the world. According to my own research, fashion industry tops the list together with energy, transportation, agriculture, and food retail. While demand seems limitless, natural resources such as cotton have defined limits. Businesses seem to genetically modify cotton, or what we call GMOs, just so they can have enough raw material, and which pose risk not only to farmlands but to human health as well. They also monopolized owning these said lands, which led to uh, instability of the emotional well-being of farmers when they cannot earn enough to sustain both living necessities of their families and their landowners' fees, which cause debts. DEBT. The film's main purpose is awareness of negative effects of the imbalanced supply and demand in the fashion industry. On the latter part of the film, Morgan also defined some ways or tried to define some ways on how to address these issues. Consumers must understand that happiness doesn't come on owning always new and fancy things, or what we call materialism. Some open minded names in the industry also support Morgan in questioning the ways of business owners on how business owners operate and how this can be improved. It was also highlighted that changing a system that's already been there is time consuming and arduous work. But if it will be favorable in the end, won't it be worth it? So, my first key takeaway is consumerism and capitalism of the $3 trillion industry, which is, on this case, the garments and textile industry. In America alone, media affected people's desire to follow the trend, especially in clothing. The supply-demand cycle was too fast-moving since clothes are tend to be disposed and replaced easily. As I've mentioned earlier, around 400% of the clothing consumption increased from 1990s to the uh, from the filming year of around 2013 to 2015. So that's roughly 10 to 20 years gap only. An average American has around 80 pound of textile waste per year, with only 10% of the total consumption are being donated to thrift stores or being reused, and the rest were exposed, especially on landfills. Capitalism, again, in America, uh, the nation produced 95% of what its people wore in 1960, which was reduced to a mere 3% in 2010. Most manufacturers moved to countries like China, India, Cambodia, and Bangladesh, which were known for cheap labor, however, with poor working conditions and labor rights. Major brands prioritize minimizing costs to optimize profits, and environmental risks such as what I've said, GMOs and hazardous accidents, seem to be swept under the rug, which is a sad but reality of others. My second key takeaway is in relation to what I've said earlier, which is poverty and inequality. Hazardous accidents such as the 2013 Dhaka Bangladesh Rana Plaza collapse killed around more than 1,000 people and injured more. Low salary, slave-like treatment in Cambodia by workers or by workers being beaten up by their managers upon demand of better working conditions and labor rights, or being shot by police during rallies demanding for salary increase in Cambodia. Most big government companies have their own code of conduct, yet there were no clear definition in supporting the law defending fair working conditions and fair competition for the manufacturing workers or factory workers. They keep this code as voluntary, as major brands do not employ the workers and not really own the factories. Think of it as brands outsourcing their manufacturers on those developing countries. Therefore, they remain legally free of responsibility during any accidents or any other inequality issues. And key takeaways or keywords are low wages, unsafe working conditions, and factory disasters. So what can we do about this? The documentary pointed out that public awareness of the socio-economic and environmental impact of fast fashion industry to the consumers is the most important thing that we can do so far. To address cheap and unfair labor to workers, poor working environment, and pollution due to textile waste. Later on, I will be discussing this in the next slides, but there are some popular names in the fashion industry that tried to challenge the system quo of the textile and garments industry regarding these major issues that we have tackled earlier. Personal framework, so you can pause this video if you'd like. This is just one of the most general use supply chain framework in the garments or textile industry. Okay. So, first is customer request database and operations management. So, of course, customers will place orders in the supplier or their POCs in the manufacturing, and the supplier will inform the manufacturing team for supply and demand planning. So demand planning, this is where the placing of orders in the system takes place, creating a forecast, and analyzing for any trends or seasonalities. Supply planning, on the other hand, involves raw material, capacity, and production planning. So we will be focusing more on this part, the the supply planning, because demand and supply planning are usually intersect or are intertwined with each other through a common database in their company. So, personnel framework, production mostly involves labor, raw material, facilities, and equipment. By major brands outsourcing their manufacturing plants to developing countries with cheap resources, on this case it's labor, they will be able to create low-cost pricing structure, which would be of course appealing to the consumers or customers. Besides of course the aesthetic. Bangladesh is supposed to be, or Bangladesh supposed to be, has the lowest paid garments workers in the world, for as low as $3 a day. Obviously, this is not enough to sustain a family or even oneself, and so is unfair for the workers. But definitely advantageous to the conglomerates whose aim is, of course, to gain profit. What can I say? This is just what can I say? Because gaining profit is, of course, one of the goals of any business or any corporation. So, yeah. But of course, we also need to look on the other side of the coin, which of course, in this case, is the supply side. The most common type of garments or raw material is the most common raw material type for garments is cotton, since it is supposed to be not harmful to the skin and at the same time adaptable to both high and cold weather temperatures. However, the gap between demand of textile and supply of cotton is too high. The reason for that is that demand seems to be limitless, while cotton as a part of nature has of course defined limits. Taking or farming high volume of cotton at a fast pace will cause depletion. In fact, 80% of cotton farming in Texas use GMO or genetically modified seeds. Organic farming seems to be history, and that needs to be addressed soon. In fact, diseases suspect to be related to chemical farming is getting higher and higher, such as cancer, as years or days, weeks, months, years pass by. In India, farmers are being exploited by GMO seed sellers by increasing the price by more than 100% due to monopoly. And so, farmers are not allowed to harvest until they pay their dues, which of course is too high compared to the meager salaries that they are getting. Hence, they are left with no choice but to incur debts, which is almost impossible to be paid off, no matter how hard they work. This leads to emotional distress, like what I'm feeling right now, and which is evident in high suicide rate in India of around 1 person in every 30 minutes. That's in 2015. Soil and water contamination in Pune, India causes cancer, birth defects for around 70 to 80% of babies that time, abnormal skin conditions, and other health risks. Kanpur River of India was also vastly polluted as the water is being used to tan leather cheaply. Freely, cheaply. Wake-up call. One of the deadliest garments accident was 2013's Rana Plaza collapse in Bangladesh, Dhaka, Bangladesh. I will just be reading this quickly. So, After investigation, it was found out that the government suspiciously approved the construction. The buildings were poorly constructed and the materials were substandard. No surprise. And the power generators were so large that it shook the factory floors whenever it's turned on. A day before the accident, an engineer was called to inspect the safety of the building as workers noticed that there are already cracks on the walls. At that time, there was even no earthquake. He did warn the owners, but the following day, the workers were suspiciously called again for work anyway. So, what happened was when the generators were turned on, the building, as expected, collapsed. It was so sudden that the event killed more than 1,000 people and left many people injured and orphaned of their families and loved ones. Another example is Tazreen Fashions, which happened 5 months earlier than the Rana Plazas. It, this killed 110 people. Many popular brands were manufacturing in Rana Plaza at that time, such as Walmart, Gap, and Adidas. The accident shook the world, and many global labor rights groups were aghast and not satisfied upon knowing that those companies merely provided donations to those who were bereaved. They made noise. This is a major ethical and socio-economic issue. However, the problem is that the government itself, in fear of losing business, they can simply sanction those conglomerates or demand to provide investment for working environment improvements. In fact, some even argued that garments workers are in better conditions than to other industries. Actually, I don't think this is actually beside the point. A Leia actor, based on my own personal research also, which I found on a different article, the source is also stated here on this slide. A Leia actor, a union leader and Secretary General of the Bangladesh Garment and Industrial Workers Federation at that time, noted that there are about 4 million workers in their country. It's impossible for them to get work anywhere else because this is what they know. Not only are we asking for compensation from the brands, but we are also asking them, do not walk away from us. Do not walk away from Bangladesh. There are many implications on this statement, but it just boils down to one thing, that on this situation, the Bangladeshi garments workers are at the lowest side of the chain. Typically, consumerism is good as it increases economic promotion and creates jobs. It also leads profit and even healthy competition between companies of the same industry. But is it always the same case? Many researchers show that the more materialistic a person gets, the less happier he or she is, as the limit of satisfaction is constantly challenged. This is fueled by what we see in the public media. I see a beautiful item, I want to get it type of attitude. 80 billion clothing are being bought per year, which is 100% more than 20 years ago. And of course, this contributes to more garbage dumped on landfills. There are some in Haiti, there are even some in the Philippines. Yeah. In particular, garments industry had 1 million tons of textile waste were being thrown per year. America produced 95% of what its people wore in 1960, which was reduced to 3% in 2010. Because As I've mentioned earlier, most of the manufacturing sites were moved to other developing countries for cheaper labor. Major clothing brands are getting richer by the day, as the behind the scenes workers, especially the farmers, are getting poorer and debt ridden. Uh, Light within the dark. Of course, as I've mentioned earlier, there are some people in the industry who are challenging the system to make a difference. You can pause this video to read more in detail, but we have Rick Ridgway of Patagonia, Stella McCartney, who was a famous designer, Livia Firth of Eco Age, Safi Yamini of People Tree. Yeah, some experts. I'd like to focus on People Tree. Uh, this operates on a fair trade standards. It also promotes full transparency and accountability for consumers to know that the stuff they buy support other people and is not harmful to the environment in any way. Uh, Mini was not pessimistic on the future of the garments industry. However, this was in 2015 and it's already 2022. And so far, what do you think is the state of the garments industry? Some experts are convinced that the problem is within the system. Capitalism and materialism enjoys profits but disregard its implications, such as poor labor rights and working environment, high-risk facilities due to substandard materials, and other issues. They suggest for consumers to be more aware of how their clothing are being made and implied to do what's right, especially for the environment. However, there were also some critics who said that the film does not have clear and tangible suggestions of what changes can be made in the current system, and the addiction of consumers to buy low-priced aesthetic clothing is unlikely to change. This I agree. Of course, this is but a short film, so it is expected that some issues seem to be oversimplified. In fact, I think personally that this is an opportunity for other concerned and talented individuals to take on the challenge of deep diving this issue. And they can even extend to other industries. For my closing thoughts, as I was watching the video, I am more than appalled by the injustice those people experienced. It has opened my eyes that for every item you see on the surface as pretty, beautiful, aesthetic, there might be some families on the other side of the world that are crying due to poverty or even loss of family. However, I also acknowledge that the consumerism is already so deeply ingrained on the society that it's impossible to expect change overnight. The Bangladeshi accident was actually a serious wake-up call, but I guess it is not bad enough as long as money pours in freely to the pockets of the capitalists. And of course, the consumer's materialism. I know that there is always a silver lining at the end of the day, but thinking and doing action about the issue are two different things. Aside from the suggestions provided by experts earlier, I also think that the government should impose stronger labor and environmental laws to protect their lands and their citizens. Money is really a strong temptation, but the Mother Nature has its own way of taking back what is rightfully hers. So, overall, I think the documentary is very interesting. My emotions went on a roller coaster, and that the author or producer achieved its purpose of spreading awareness and sparking interest to its viewers. or even healthy debates to some. So, yeah, that's all for my insights for the documentary for today. And if there are any other questions, please just let me know. Thank you and have a great day.